Welcome to the 700 Club. Is it a time for love or is it a time for war? You know, there's a purpose of everything under heaven we read in the Bible, and there's a time, and it seems like now is the time to say, I understand your pain. I want to comfort you. I think it's time we love each other. But the president took a different course. He said, I am the president of law and order. And he issued a heads up. He said, I'm ready to send in military troops if the nation's governors don't act to quell the violence that has rocked American City. As a matter of fact, he spoke of them as being jerks. You just don't do that, Mr. President. It isn't cool. Well, the question is, does the president have the authority to call out the troops? What do we have? The Posse Comitatus Act? I mean, how do you do it? You got to go all the way back to pre-Civil War days to find an ordinance to give him that authority. Dale Hurd has more.
Another night of looting and anarchy on American streets, but Donald Trump has pledged to stop it. Demonstrations against the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis while in police custody have turned violent across the country, with people breaking into businesses and stealing, smashing car windows and setting buildings on fire. Police officers were targeted. In St. Louis, 4 police officers were shot and another in Las Vegas. In Buffalo, New York, an SUV drove into a crowd of police. In Philadelphia, counter-protesters armed with golf clubs, baseball bats, and even hatchets faced off against rioters. And in California, business owners had to defend their property themselves. President Trump says he's mobilizing all civilian and military forces to end nationwide looting and property destruction, which he says are caused by outside agitators.
The biggest victims of the rioting are peace-loving citizens in our poorest communities. And as their president, I will fight to keep them safe. I will fight to protect you. I am your president of law and order.
And in an iconic moment, the president walked across Lafayette Park and held up a Bible outside historic St. John's Church, which was set on fire Sunday night. The move drew condemnation from some because police cleared Lafayette Park of protesters before the trip. The Episcopal bishop who oversees the church also criticized the president's action. Some Democratic governors are resisting the president's threat to deploy the U.S. military unless they dispatch National Guard to stop the violence. But President Trump could use something called the Insurrection Act to do it.
If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
In Minneapolis, at the site where George Floyd took his last breath, his brother Terrence demanded for the violence to stop.
Because that's not going to bring my brother back at all.
The results from 2 autopsies find Floyd's death was a homicide, but they differ on the cause. The county medical examiner says he died from a heart attack, complicated by being under restraint. But experts hired by Floyd's family said he died of asphyxiation from sustained pressure. In an effort to end racial violence, the One Race movement, a group of Christian pastors, held an outdoor press conference in Atlanta to bring a message of hope. Bishop Garland Hunt of the Father's House told CBN News the nation's pastors have to step in.
We just believe the church, particularly the pastors, have to come in as a group where we literally are reconciled, black and white, Asian, Hispanic. We are one, and we want to speak peace to our city. We want to speak love to our city.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Love one another, the Bible says. God is love, and he that lives in love lives in God, and God in him. We've got to love each other. We just have to do that. And people say, well, what about race? Well, God made us all. Let's face it. We all came from one family. If you read the Bible, Adam and Eve, and then all the races came from them. And so we're one race. And we may have different skin color and different shape of our eyes, but we're one. And it's time we recognize. And when you go into these other cultures, you see such wonderful people, you see such loving people, you see people who care for their families, and it's not just something that's unique to the white race, it's to all of us. we're all one race, and we need to love each other. And we cannot let outside agitators feed on the dark side of our humanity. We just can't do it. Well, there's something more at risk, you know, going on with this nationwide demonstration. They're losing the sight of social distancing and the idea that you have to be apart. This coronavirus is very deadly, and it can damage the lungs and the internal organs way beyond just its first appearance. And will this demonstration bring about a resurgence of that dread pandemic? Ephraim Graham brings us that story.
Pat, public health officials do fear the massive protests could bring a resurgence of the coronavirus, with tens of thousands of protesters in dozens of cities, many without masks, standing side by side and shouting. They say it all dramatically raises the risk of new outbreaks. Even worse, the new cases would probably hurt African American and Latino populations most, which have already been hit hard by the virus. Officials say anyone who attended the demonstrations should self-quarantine for 14 days. The population hit hardest by the pandemic is people ages 65 and older. However, the virus is having a disturbing effect on some younger adults. As Lori Johnson explains, doctors are looking closely at the connection between COVID-19 and a potentially deadly complication.
In New York and New Jersey, young adults in their 30s and 40s with COVID-19 are experiencing the most serious type of stroke. Although the numbers are small, it's a sharp increase.
What we think is happening with the COVID virus is that it is thickening people's bloods. In other words, it's thrombogenic. So there is some evidence that younger people may be affected by the COVID just because of the fact of the virus.
That thickening can lead to blood clots in vessels leading to the brain, causing a stroke. Doctors must act fast to remove the clot and get the patient out of danger.
Every minute counts because once the blood supply is missing to the brain, cells begin to die pretty quickly.
COVID-19 is also affecting treatment of this condition in other ways.
New figures show some people who would normally seek medical care for a stroke may now hesitate because they're afraid of catching COVID at the hospital.
Sharon Robinson had a stroke at the peak of the COVID crisis. Despite the potential danger, her daughter called 911.
Primarily, my mother was having a stroke. So that was bigger than a fear of COVID-19. And I also have faith in God, so Jesus, to be specific. So it was more of a faith thing.
Sharon recovered fully.
I just praise God. You know, everything was just marvelous. Everything, it was quick. I was in the hospital only 2 days. And the doctors was like, you know, this is so unbelievable.
She's now featured in a video encouraging the public to follow her example.
Don't fear to call 911 because people like us, the people who do thrombectomies, we're here. We're at the hospitals. We gear up and we're ready to handle patients who have potential COVID and may be having a stroke.
Stroke symptoms include face drooping, arm weakness, and difficulty speaking. While Sharon lives with her daughter, people who live alone are at greater risk, especially during this pandemic.
And then when you're told to stay away from people staying home, there's not that good network of people to check on each other.
So make frequent phone calls to older family members and friends. Ask questions about how they feel. Also, be aware of the signs and symptoms of a stroke, knowing it could help save a life. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Valuable information. Pat?
I am totally familiar with the effects of strokes, because what happens is a blood clot gets through your veins and hits your brain. And when it does, it shuts off a portion of the blood flowing to cells in your brain. For every minute, get this, for every minute that blockage takes place, you lose 1 million cells in your brain. 1 million for every minute. So if it takes an hour, just figure that's 60 million brain cells, and they don't come back. You can play around them, but they don't come back. And so the idea of taking a blood thinner, I take right now, every day, I take something called Xarelto. And I had a pacemaker, and the guy, you know, I figured, okay, I'm cool. I've got a pacemaker. I don't have that shortening of breath that, you know, you have with that. And that took care of everything. My heart's beating just fine. And then I had a little stroke. Fortunately, Gordon was on the scene. My caregiver was on the scene. The head of security, he ran down the highway. He's a police officer, but he ran at 95 miles an hour to get me to the hospital. And they hit me with something called TPA that broke up the clot.
Most people, I thought of this after your incident, don't know that there are certain hospitals in your area that specialize in things like this.
We have one local, the rule is if you call an ambulance, they're supposed to take you to the nearest center. But the Lee Memorial, which is the one closest to us, does not have a stroke center. The one downtown does. So when we drove this time, we didn't ask for any ambulance. We went directly down. But when my wife had her stroke, we didn't realize what to do. And so they carried her to this one hospital, and they did some tests. Then they finally got her downtown to the main one, but it was hours. And
you can only get that TPA shot within a certain realm of time.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And when it does, it begins to work. But I tell you, this is serious stuff, folks. And every day at night, I take my little blood thinner. My doctor, Chauncey Crandall, says, why don't you take Xarelto? It's a terrific stuff. And I take one pill.
Good for you.
One pill.
Good for you. But you've learned so much through this. We all have.
Listen, I mean, it is serious stuff. And if this COVID, doctors use all these fancy words. It's thrombogenic. I mean, come off it. I mean, that sounds like, okay, it'll build up blood clots. That's what it'll do, and you need a blood thinner. So I don't know why they don't give these blood thinners to people who've had this COVID. I mean,
or why they wouldn't have them at every hospital.
Well, you know,
the precedent is
it takes the cardiologist, but I really think it should be done. Okay, well, so much on medicine today, but whatever, if somebody gets this COVID, make sure they do something to get a blood thinner. It's not all that hard, and one little pill is the easiest little pill in the world. I'm not talking about sticking your finger or any of that stuff. Just one little pill once a day thins out your blood and keeps those clots from forming. You don't want a stroke. COVID's bad enough. And listen, something else that's bad, the economy. What is this thing going to do to our economy?
Oh, goodness.
It will take 10 years. Ephraim, give us the story.
Pat, as you said, it could take 10 years for the U.S. economy to recover from the pandemic and its shutdowns. The Congressional Budget Office is revising its forecast of economic output from 2020 to 2030, projecting the U.S. economy will produce nearly $8 trillion less than it predicted in January. That's about 3% of the gross domestic product. The CBO believes the economy won't get fully back on track until late 2029. When the pandemic shut down their Dallas business, one couple worried about the welfare of their employees, and it led them to a creative idea to put their furloughed staff back to work and to help other companies safely reopen. Charlene Aaron is on this story.
Business was good for Alex and Kelsey Carroll of Toss Up Events, a Christian-owned company providing interactive gaming experiences. They've worked with some of the biggest names in pro sports, NASCAR's Atlanta Motor Speedway, Houston Rodeo, and Big East basketball. Then the global pandemic brought the sports world to a screeching halt. So did business for the Carrolls, quickly going from $3 million a year to nothing.
We had all of our employees all over the country, and then it all stopped on the same day.
A dozen employees laid off.
Knowing that we were going to have to let our employees go, it was really hard.
As nerves and social distancing became the norm, the couple saw the need for safety equipment like hand sanitizer. In just 6 weeks, they transitioned to providing customized hand sanitizer stations, complete with dispensers and liquid sanitizer.
We knew that when events did come back, safety would be a huge deal. And we started just offering the hand sanitizer stations to businesses and churches.
As the country has slowly reopened, response to their stand-up stations has been overwhelming.
We're getting all kinds of businesses, orders from California, Washington, Texas, Florida, like all over the country.
We didn't foresee this happening a couple of weeks ago, the success. And so I think as more and more businesses and churches reopen, they're going to be looking for a solution like this.
With more than $1 million in sales and a growing team, these business owners are beyond grateful.
God had a plan for our employees, for us, for our family, and being able to see the employees come back to the office. And we've had more people join the team.
Yeah.
So we're up to 20 people in our office just working around the clock to get these shipped out. So it's been such a blessing, and we've been really fortunate.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Creativity saves a business. Pat?
Isn't that marvelous? You know, God has solutions. Keep that in mind. Well, one avenue is closed. Well, that doesn't mean there are not a million other avenues that he'll open to you. All you have to do is look and wait and say, God, show me the way. And, you know, there's no temptation taking you but such as common to man, but God will, with the temptation, make a way to escape. And they escaped it, so you can escape too.